Shabbat Shalom. Throughout the generations, Jews have always looked for new ways of discovering insights, moral lessons, practical knowledge from the Torah, trying to squeeze every bit of information that we can out of every pasuk, every verse, and every word. But we've also tried to come up with new sets of questions, things that can be asked not just on one particular sentence, but questions that can be asked along the way. And each new question that is introduced into our study of the Torah opens up vistas for interpreting and learning from all the Torah completely. One of the new questions, and I say new, I mean last several hundred years, is the question that's based on the premise that the Torah is eternal. Nothing in the Torah is dated, and therefore anything that seems to be dated must have some inner meaning, and we should look for that. Perhaps it was Rabbi Moshe Alshech who began this line of inquiry. I'm not quite sure, but it was taken forward by many others. Basically, it's for the most part it's used when studying the stories in the Torah, the stories particularly in Bereshit of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, but also along the way, beginning with the sort of rhetorical remark, Maida have have. Whatever happened, happened. A nice story, but it happened thousands of years ago. And why should the Torah take up precious space just telling us these stories? And then we look into it and we see that it's really worthwhile, even in our own day, a lot to learn from it. But Rabbi Yosef of Polnoye, the student of the Ball Shem Tov, but someone who was a great rabbi, a great darshan, before he became acquainted with the Ball Shem Tov, before he became introduced to Hasidus, I think took this even further in a very revolutionary way in our Parsha Kitavo, because he asks a question on Bikkurim, first fruits. The Torah is eternal. This is no longer relevant. Why do we have to know about it? This is really strange because Bikkurim is not practical today. We can't do it the way we can't do any of the other commandments that are connected with the temple. But theoretically, it's valid and enforced today. And if we were to build the temple tomorrow, which in view of the recent elections and the type of government looks to be forming, looks to be the last thing they're on their mind, but nevertheless, in theory, we would, if the temple was standing today, the mitzvah would go back into place, and it's relevant. Yet he asks the question of Bikkurim. Why? What is relevant to us today? This whole story of offering the first fruits of our labor, first fruits of our produce to God, and he finds some nice insights there. And so he indeed finds some very good lessons that the Torah says that your first fruits should be given to God. More particularly, Reshit Pri Admatcha, free of your land, of your dirt, Adamah's dirt. And then the drash is that dirt. Well, we're all made of dust, and we come from the earth and we go back to the earth. So Reshit Pri Admatcha, the first fruits of your earth, means your first fruits of your body, and all first things should be directed towards God, towards worship, towards spiritual improvement. Just to give a few examples, the first thing that we want our children to say is Torah Tzvi Moshe. That's the first thing teach them to say. They said their first speech should be Torah. The first thing we do in the day is to daven, to go to shul. You do that before anything else. When you're fresh and your mind is clear, you go and you're not already into the run-of-the-mill activities that keep us so active and distract us from our true spiritual needs. You pray first thing in the morning. Even when you make some money or earn something, the first thing is to give to the poor, and so on. And he takes us on in quite a way, and so finds that Reshit Pri Admatcha, or the mitzvah of Bikkurim, is a general mitzvah that applies to all of us at all times, to give the first fruits of our labors, the first fruits of our day, the first fruits of our sense perceptions, first fruits of our activities, always have them directed towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu and our proper worship. Now he has another beautiful drash on this, much earlier on, where he has a homily on the story of the spies. It's actually not in Parashat Shalach, but it's on the spies who are sent to study the land of Israel and bring up a report. Ritem Aretz Mahi, tell us about the land. The people who live there, do they live in fortresses or out in the open, and so on. And the springboard, the trigger for this drash is that the Torah tells us at the end that this episode took place, Bikkurim Anavim. It was the time of the Bikkurim of Anavim, the first fruits of the vine. And he has this as a wonderful drash, which basically tells us that the spying is really our own self-inspection. We should try and understand ourselves as best as we can in order to see what spiritual program, what spiritual regimen fits us. Are we more suited to learning by ourselves or learning b'chevruta, learning with others? Are we more suited to studying Tanakh or to studying Gemara? Do we have the capacity within ourselves to overcome the Yetzer Hara with the strength of our own will? Or do we really need some outside help? And so on and so forth. He's Dorish, all of the things that the spies were told to look at, whether they live in cities or not, and are in the open, and so on. And then Vayamim Yemei Bikkurim Anavim. When do we do this introspection, this self study of our own selves, trying to understand ourselves best in order to regulate our lives in the way that suits us best? We're all very different, and what works for one person won't work for the other. Vayamim Yemei Bikkurim Anavim. Do it when you're young, because when you're young, you're still malleable, you're still flexible, you're still able to change. And in this connection, he brings another drasha, which actually comes from the Zohar, Lefnei Seva Takum, which means in the drash, get up and get going before you're old. Because when you get old, you can't do it anymore. So as young as possible, try and see what you are, what your makeup is, so that you can have the regimen that fits you best to meet your spiritual goals. Now, most of my talks on the parsha, most of my work is not at all connected with Hasidus, but aside from the fact that I come from as a family, Hasidic family, actually that drush on the spies it would fit perfectly well with the medieval philosophical midrashim in Yemen and elsewhere, a really creative and ingenious way of reading the story, which I hope will find favor in your eyes. And those of you, particularly those of you who are younger than I am, maybe can get hold of things while you're still young and get yourselves on the right track as soon as possible. Thank you very much, and Shabbat Shalom.